Welcome back to another solo episode. Today, it's just you and me, and I'm so excited to talk about anger, which might sound really weird, but it's this like newfound superpower skill, I don't know, thing that I'm trying out lately. And I'll get into why this is so like unfamiliar territory for me, but I've been wanting to do an episode on anger for a while now because this has been a recurring theme and nudge from God to me and has really been so good. Just learning how to process it in a healthy way, how to release it, how to go from a lifetime of suppressing my anger to learning what sacred rage means and how to express it and get it out of my body so that it's not harming myself or others, spilling out, on those around me that I love. So, I'm going to start from the beginning and just talk about my relationship with anger in hopes that you might see yourself in part of my story. But growing up, anger was never displayed in my home growing up. It was the classic passive aggressive home where things were swept under the rug and we constantly felt the tension but never displayed it, never talked about it. I was an only child and I have clear memories of my mom and dad just, having this energy, this tension between them. And my mom would literally stomp up the stairs and my dad would be like, "What's wrong?" And she'd be like, "Nothing." And it's like, clearly something's wrong. So I never ever heard them yell at each other, raise their voices. They never yelled or raised their voices at me. There was just a lot simmering below the surface. I don't know if you can relate or if you grew up in a home quite different. Maybe you grew up in a home where, plates were thrown and there was a lot of anger, and that was its own form of trauma for you on the other end of the spectrum. So I remember growing up, and this one best friend I had, I'll call her Ashley so I don't put her out there. But Ashley, I remember in middle school, this was like the first fight I ever got in. She made me so mad. And the way I fought, again, it wasn't with words, it wasn't yelling, it wasn't outwardly expressing my anger. It was like very hidden. And I remember us being in line at a track and field practice. We were like waiting for some kind of drill. And this is how middle schoolers fight. There's no punches thrown, not even slapping. But I would like sneak and grab the belly fat from under her tracksuit and like twist it. It's kind of like a titty twister, but a tummy twister. And she tried doing it back to me. And we were just like furious with each other, angry, irritated about something. But that was how we were fighting each other. And then I remember us getting in a fight one time at a movie theater where we pushed each other in the dark off the movie theater seats. Like always had to be very hidden. And then, this is just one friend. Like literally, there's no other stories I could think of growing up of other friends where stuff like this would happen. It's just this one friend. She ends up dating my boyfriend. My boyfriend breaks up with me. I was so in love with him. And it was like this fairy tale dream come true that we ended up together. He took me to prom. And then right before leaving for college, classic, right? He's like, "I can't do long distance. I got to let you go." That liar, it wasn't the long distance. It was him starting to date my best friend after that. And I was like, how could you? Like, yes, I was heartbroken from being broken up with, but then girl code is a whole nother thing. Like, best friend dating your ex-boyfriend, just not about that. So I felt so much anger towards her. But again, I never talked to her about it. I never expressed it. I just went cold, silent treatment. And we didn't talk for, God, probably a whole year. And we finally made up by playing each other at a high school powder puff football game, which is where the girls play an annual football game at our school. And we ended up like giving each other a high five. And that's how we broke the tension. Never talked about it, but have been friends ever since. And now we can laugh about it because it was all in high school and I'm still actually, in touch with her and love her to death. But that's how I dealt with anger. I didn't know how to let it out. I just let it all be stuffed down and come out and spill out in different ways. And then in college, I got really involved in a church. And, in church, there's different scriptures that I don't think they were interpreted the way that they were meant to be interpreted, but I basically got the message a lot that anger is bad. I mean, it's one of the seven deadly sins for heaven's sake, and that it's wrong. It was very drilled into me, even in my marriage, that scripture, do not let the sun go down while you're still angry. And that was probably one of the worst marriage pieces of advice that we ever got because we would be up trying to squash a fight or talk something out till like 2, 3 in the morning when I mean, who's coherent at that time? All of our energy is drained and our brain is fuzzy and inhibitions like down, like all of the recipe for a bad conversation. That's not when you should be talking about, at least us talking about something that's hard or serious, and it would never go well. But I was like, we cannot go to bed until we're perfectly resolved. And a lot of that was also a fawn survival response in me. Fawning meaning just needing him to be okay with me, needing him to be happy with me, needing us and our connection to feel good all the time, or else I could not feel good. Didn't know how to feel good outside of us being good. So that, not letting the sun go down when you're angry didn't work for us. We tried it for 10 years. And then when I finally stepped into somatic work and started to learn how to feel safe in my nervous system and learn how to accept my anger, let alone express it. I remember the first time sleeping on the couch. And that was a no-no, just in the way I was like conditioned and raised that it's bad to sleep on the couch and all this stuff entailed with that. But it was one of the best things for us. And my husband noticed it, and that was different. And that was when he started to notice I was changing this toxic dance we had been stepping in our marriage for so long. And learning how to express anger was one of the healthiest things for our marriage. I'll get into that in a little bit. There's also a scripture, amazing scripture, but it got twisted. Don't be concerned about the outward beauty. You should clothe yourselves instead with this beauty that comes from within, an unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit. And I even read this book, Gentle and Quiet Spirit, right before I got married. And I really, it's so interesting. Like I had this idea pretty deeply ingrained that if I could just be a gentle and quiet wife, if I'm not loud or angry, then our marriage is going to be perfect and I'm going to be the perfect wife. And it was actually one of the most unhealthy things that led to the toxic dance and just energy and environment between Sebastian and I, was mistaking what that meant. I don't have time to get into like a exegetical, explanation of the Greek word of that, the meaning of that and all of the gentle and quiet definitions. But I will say it doesn't mean just shutting up and not expressing what you're feeling in the way that I interpreted it. So, all the things that made me angry over the course of my life, from peers at school to men and boyfriends who crossed boundaries with me, even when I was trying to say no, to my dad suddenly dying when I was very young, to being cheated on, having female friends who I considered family betray me, being lied to, being gaslit, and then becoming a parent. And when you're a parent, there's something every day that could set you off. So, this lifetime, right? I'm 34 years old now. It's pretty much 33 years where I was deeply conditioned to stuff all of that anger and suppress all of the bubbling, boiling rage. But the truth about trauma, and if you've listened to my podcast for even just 5 minutes, you've heard me say this. I'm going to talk about it a lot, but the body keeps the score of the trauma we've survived. And this is a cute little catchphrase, but is actually very true. The issues are in the tissues. Our literal experiences are encoded and trapped within our muscle fascia, our energetic blueprint, our subconscious, our cellular makeup. And if we don't know how to complete grief or move trauma out of our body or complete the cycle of a survival response, it's going to get locked inside our body. Basically, the body keeps the score. So, trauma, it's, gosh, when any big or little trigger reminds us of a past trauma or a person in our life, our nervous system will respond as if it's happening right now. So we see this example pretty clearly, let's say for the 4th of July, for any veterans who have been in active combat, when they hear fireworks, that's a terrible night for many veterans. It takes them right back and they start reliving being in battle and the gunshots and all of that as if it is happening right now. This is what trauma does when we don't know how to move it out of our bodies and bring our nervous systems back into this state of homeostasis that really trusts, okay, the disaster or the trauma or the danger has passed, but it's not happening right now. Trauma, when stuck in our body, makes us believe what happened in the past is happening again right now, and even when it's not true. So we get our perception skewed of replay versus reality, and that's something I work on a lot with my clients in our Root to Rise program, is telling the difference using nervous system work between, is this just a replay of past hurt, or is this reality, like we actually are in danger right now and need to move to safety. So, a lot of people continue to feel the effects of trauma, and you may have heard this, known as post traumatic stress, right? People feel these effects for years after the traumatic event. One of the biggest myths out there is time heals all wounds. Time itself does not. Trauma is like frozen in time. But what you do within that time determines what and how much is healed. It shows up in our body in so many different ways, from feeling easily overwhelmed or feeling, on edge, muscle tension, chest tightness, trouble sleeping, nightmares, brain fog, trouble focusing, anxiety, avoidance, hyperactivity, depression. I mean, we think that's just like a typical average bio for how any of us show up and function because we've normalized it so much in our society. It's so common. But just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal or how we were meant to live. So for me, all of the trauma that I had experienced over the course of my life, all of the things that made me angry, it left me in this state of, like, I call it rigor mortis, where your body goes into after you pass and everything's all stiff and rigid. That was me. I had massage therapists be like, "Honey, why are you so tight? Why are you so stressed?" And my muscles were just hard as concrete. I hated dancing. I always said, like, I'm not a dancer, and that was just a mask for I have so much pain I'm holding on to, and dancing felt scary. It felt too vulnerable. It felt like if I let loose, then all of the pain trapped inside, all of the anger, might go crazy, and I need to contain it. I need to hold it in. It's too much to let go of. So I was rigid AF. But, you know, this stuffing, this suppressing, it doesn't actually make it go away. And neither does the raging if it's not done in a way where it's not harming you or others. There's kind of two ends of the extreme, those like me who push it all down, and those who just release it in a way that is harmful to themselves and to others, basically re traumatizing themselves and kept keeping themselves stuck in the trauma response. So we're going to talk about what the balance is today and how what sacred rage can do and how it can be intentional and very healing, not harmful to you or others. But yeah, stuffing it down doesn't make it go away, it spills out. Makes me think of this time when I must have been in middle school and I was with my friend Lacey and we stole a cigarette from my Aunt Lori and we snuck it down to the basement. I was like, let's smoke it in the basement so that when my parents get home, like they won't smell anything in the house. Idiot me, not thinking like, oh, smoke actually rises. So me and my friend Lacey smoked this cigarette like all wrong, right? We're coughing, we're, don't even know what we're doing. And then we go upstairs, go to sleep. My mom gets home, and I remember hearing her from the minute she opened the door downstairs. She was like, "Back in." And me and Lacey just went stiff. We, like, looked at each other, eyes popped open, pulled the covers up to our necks, and I was like, "Shh, don't say anything. Pretend you're asleep." And my mom starts stomping up the stairs, and she was like, who was smoking cigarettes in my house? And let me tell you, my mom used to be like a pack-a-dayer and she had quit and she had worked so hard to get that stench out of our house. So when she smelled it, she was livid. And I tried to lighten the mood and I responded with I said to my mom, Snickers, which was our cat's name at the time, hoping it would like loosen the tension. And she was like, out. Lacey, you're going home right now. Get in your car. I want you out of my house. Becky. And she like woke my dad up. We had like a big talk on the stairs about it. I think that's the angriest I ever saw my mom. So speaking of a family that never expressed anger, I think that's the only memory I actually have of her expressing anger. But that's the thing, like the smoke, how it just permeated and rose through the house. That's the thing with anger. We think we're being so sneaky when we're stuffing it down, when actually it's spilling out and everyone around us can smell it and feel it and sense it. It's that like elephant in the room that maybe you're not saying it outright, but you're not fooling anyone. You know, we can pick up each other's vibes and we can sense when things are off with one another. And my husband sure as hell could feel it in my energy. And then it would start to spill out on the kids as the kids started to get older. I posted on Instagram last week the not so glamorous side of me, and I shared how in our marriage, only one person has thrown a punch, and it wasn't my husband. And I also shared how this year I was so angry at my daughter, I actually punched a hole in our bathroom door. She had locked herself in the bathroom and she was refusing to let me in. And I'm picturing her like drinking bleach. And so it was a mix of like, total offense to her not listening and total fear that she was doing something harmful to herself that I started banging on the door out of anger. And I was like, Anna, you let me out, let me in right now. And it terrified her. And she did open the door and we repaired, but it was a wake up call to me. And I had a literal bruise on my palm that, like, holy crap, I need to learn how to manage this because it's starting to be like the volcano that it's bubbled up long enough, like 30 years dormant, right? And then one day just explodes. And I don't want it to spill out on the people that I love the most, the last ones that I'd ever want to harm. So, this has been my year of sacred rage. What is that? You might be wondering. It's anger that comes with direction, focus, and the compelling urge to do something to make change. That's what my definition is of sacred rage. So I think why people are so afraid, many of anger, is that there is the potential, right? Of like, oh my God, what could my anger do? Could it hurt me? Could it hurt somebody else? Could I get in trouble? Will it make God angry or upset with me? And, you know, as a society, it's interesting. There's a lot of conditioning around anger. And I think we decide which emotions we want to demonize when really all emotions are natural. It's just what we do with them that we need to practice and train to act in a way that really aligns in our values. But if you think about anger in our society and how overall it pretty much is feared and demonized, but you see it so natural. You see it naturally in kids. They have like no apologies for letting their anger be displayed and unapologetically like let you know when they're upset. You see it in animals. Think about animals in the wild, like a roaring lion. If you can bring the image to your face, to your mind right now of just a mama bear protecting its young or its cubs. Like animals get very angry. God himself got angry. Jesus Christ flipped tables out of righteous indignation. And then I got curious, like putting this podcast together. I was like, did Gandhi get angry? Like, if anyone were to not get angry, I could see it being Gandhi. But then I found that Gandhi's grandson actually wrote a book called The Gift of Anger by, if you want to look it up, Arun, Arun Gandhi. And he shares in that book basically Gandhi's perspective on anger. And he says this about his grandfather. He said, my grandfather saw anger as a good thing and as a fuel for change, but he made me understand you must get control over it. So even Gandhi himself didn't, shove it down, but he channeled it in a way that definitely changed the world. And then I was thinking, okay, so Gandhi got angry, got it, but surely Buddhists don't get angry. And then doing some research, and if you've heard of Thich Nhat Hanh, um, very, very known, famous teacher in the Buddhist world, but his view on it is if someone makes you angry, you should try not to suppress your anger because suppressing anger may be very dangerous. Using the energy of mindfulness to recognize your anger and embrace it tenderly is what we should do. Much safer. I loved that. And then I think about my husband's coach, Jake Kaufman. That's his personal, life coach. Jake has worked with men for years and years and years, so many different high achieving, successful men who, struggle with different things, from anger to addiction to relationship issues to a whole host of things that men have a hard time being open about, let alone alchemizing that pain into something powerful. But I remember when Jake came and taught in our group coaching program, he came as a guest expert to my women, and somebody asked a question about her husband and how her husband always gets angry. And I remember Jake saying, like, I've never met an angry man, but I've met a ton of men who haven't felt their grief. And then C.S. Lewis himself says, I sat with my anger long enough until it told me its real name was grief. So the thing with anger is it always has a backseat driver. Like anger always has something driving it below the surface, whether that's fear, stress, pain, or overwhelm. When you're angry, you can ask yourself what's going on a deeper level. What's the feeling beneath this feeling? What am I afraid of? What's stressing me out? What's hurting my heart like hell right now? What am I overwhelmed by? If you've heard the phrase to tend to befriend, sometimes what to do with this anger is be tender to it, befriend it. Sometimes it's speaking compassionately to the part of you that is afraid, stressed, hurting, or overwhelmed. This is where parts work is really amazing. If you haven't heard of parts work, internal family systems, it's a type of therapy that works with the different parts of ourselves, the different, basically characters. If you've ever seen Inside Out, the main character, Riley, has like a whole host of different emotions running the control panel of her mind and behaviors. And there's anger upstairs in her mind. There's a little character called sadness. There's a little character called joy. And they're all like fighting over the control panel. And the whole like moral of the story is some are shunned and cast to the side and not wanting to let them come out, but really all parts of her that make up her and her emotions and even her ego are valid and need to play their part. They just have to learn how to work together and channel it well. So, befriending, your anger, parts work, internal family systems therapy is a huge way to integrate these kind of fractured parts of us that we have shamed and shunned for so long and cast out. So that might be the approach that you need in a moment of anger and rage, but sometimes the approach you need is just freaking raging. My friends and I, for her 40th birthday, my good friend Erin, who's also a member of our team, she's our lead alignment strategist. She's the woman you talk to if you have questions about the program, want to see if we're an aligned fit to work together. Erin, for her 40th birthday, just decided that she wants to go to a rage room. I don't know if you've ever heard of a rage room, but she lost her mom last year. She knows what I've been through, and she invited one of our other friends, Michelle, who also lost her mom last year, to come with her, the three of us, for her birthday to just rage. And so it was scary for me because again, it's still a deeply conditioned thing that rage and anger is bad and I shouldn't express it and be a good girl and all of that stuff. But there was this other part of me that I was like, oh my gosh, this has been a recurring theme all year long that's come up in so many different ways that I feel God nudging me to be like, girl, get a better relationship with your anger and stop stuffing it and let it be felt and let it out of your body. So I was basically like, hell yes, sign me up, even with the nerves. And when we get there, we get to pick like our instruments of choice. I picked like an axe and there was a hammer and like sledgehammer. You could pick whatever you wanted. And then we picked things from wine glasses to cups to plates, and we got to write on them with Sharpies. And so what we were doing is calling out whatever we wrote on the item that we chose, just like screaming it out. I'd be like, losing my dad at 18. And then I just like smashed it with a baseball bat or smashed it on the floor. And we played loud punk music. I think Rage Against the Machine was what we picked. And it was so wild. Like I felt it coming up out of my body. And by the time we left, you could feel our energy vibrating. Like our bodies were, they felt clear, but they also felt like, whoa, that was a lot that we just kind of brought up. And so we were walking in silence for like a long time after that, just through the streets of DC. We found a rage room in DC. And we're like, wow, that was a lot and exhausting, but so good. You can do your own sacred rage session in your bedroom. You don't have to go to a rage room, but it could just be as simple as screaming your lungs out into a pillow or punching the mattress or, whatever you're feeling like your body needs to do, shaking it out. You can do that in your own living room. My friend Dawn, she's a therapist. She actually has a rage room adjacent to her office with baseball bats, and it's completely like separate and basically divided so that if she has somebody that just needs to go let out anger, she'll hold space for them or let them do it on their own. But basically, all this to say is trauma does get stuck when you don't complete the cycle, when you stuff what's needing to be expressed. And the cool thing is it's not too late to do that now. If I waited 33 years to do it and I'm getting it out now, I'm sure you can too. Now we see it as a victory when Sebastian and I fight. We swept under the rug for so long. Like it's weird. It was awkward, and it felt like we were in this constant like thruple with an elephant in the room that was our roommate for 10 years of our marriage. Just that awkward elephant in the room. Now we've kicked it out and we speak directly to each other. And when I do get mad, it's funny now because he'll be like, I'm glad you're getting angry. You have every right to be angry. And like, we're still kind of like kids learning to ride a bike and learning this new dance, but saying, like, wow, this is so much better and so much more authentic and so needed and so real and very overdue. But it just feels like an opportunity for intimacy in a way that we always thought was a threat to our connection. Now it's been an invitation to know each other deeper, being able to express our anger in safety. So it took a really long time to get here. I had to learn how to feel safe with my own anger first and then slowly share how that was a new thing that I was working on and I was learning with, sharing that with Sebastian and then sharing with him how I want to be able to express healthy anger in our marriage and in front of our kids. Like, can we practice that so it wasn't surprising him? Like, why is she all of a sudden getting mad? When the kids are like, "Mama, you're mad." I used to say, "No, no, I'm not," because I thought mad was bad. But now if they say that and I am, I'm honest, and it's so much better for the both of us. Like, I'm not gaslighting them. I'm validating what they're feeling is real, and also I'm not having to walk around pretending to be this perfect parent. So now I'll say something like, "Oh, you're right. I am frustrated right now, and this is why I think I need to take a break or a breath. Do you want to take a breath with me or you want to wait here while I take a break and I'll be right back?" And I'll say stuff sometimes like, even when I get angry, I still love you, Anna. And, my anger is never your fault, Ollie. That's my job to take care of my anger. Just so I'm mirroring to them that this is okay. I want it to be different than the house I grew up in. I want them to know that it's okay to express this. So, all of this is just some food for thought. Some people listening right now are way more comfortable than others with anger, right? We can swing to either extreme, the total suppression, or unleashing your fury, and then later trying to do damage control on those you've hurt, whether it's yourself or those around you. But remember, sacred rage is remembering that anger can come with direction, focus, and the compelling urge to do something to make change. It's purposeful. It can even be planned. It's authentic and it's a sign that something is just simply off or a boundary was crossed. And anger completely has its place to make sure that boundary isn't crossed again or to protect you from future unnecessary pain. Anger is always information. So the invitation here is to reflect on the last thing you can think of that made you angry, something that if it's going to really trigger and traumatize you, maybe pick something less intense, but go ahead and call to mind something that made you angry recently. And feel free to pause this in between if you want to take time to journal in between or, meditate on this longer. But I'm going to leave you with 6 questions before we hop off here today. The first is, where did you feel that anger in your body? 2, what, if any, judgment did you make of that anger? What thoughts or judgments or stories, judgments did you place on that anger? 3, what was driving that anger? What was the feeling under the feeling? 4, what was your knee-jerk reaction? What did you do when all the anger started bubbling up in real time? 5, did that reaction align with your values as a person? Whatever knee-jerk reaction you had, however you handled that, did that align with your values as a person? If not, what could be an anchored, empowered way of connecting with or channeling or completing that anger next time a situation like that arises? Basically, what could you do different? How could you act in a way that actually aligns with who you are, what you value, what you stand for as a human? So I hope this blessed you today, at least got the wheels turning. If you have questions, I always love DMing on Instagram. You can shoot me a message and I'll respond. If the kids aren't around, I'll probably respond with a voice note, but would love to hear what, resonated with you today, what side of the pendulum you tend to lean towards, if it's stuffing or, spewing all over. And I am so grateful for you tuning in today. Can't wait to talk to you next week.